Hello, Garland Nixon here, and we're going to talk about the issue of culture in regards to government, foreign policy, control, things of that nature. Let's talk. Hello, Garland here, and let's talk about the issue of culture. Um, let's do this. Why don't we start up? Why don't we start off by doing this? Let's look up the definition. I didn't even I didn't even do that. Let's look up what the definition of culture is. We'll start there. Culture is a noun. The arts, beliefs, customs, institutions, and other products of human work and thought considered as a unit, especially with regard to a particular time or social group, Edwardian culture, Japanese culture. These arts, beliefs, and other products considered with respect to a particular subject, mode of expression, oral culture, musical culture, right? Okay. The set of predominating attitudes and behavior that characterize a group or organization, right? A manager who changes the corporate culture. So, to some extent, culture is something that's very, I'll put it to you like this: it's difficult to track down, but you know it when you see it. And it's very general. It's how people act in a general manager, it's thoughts and beliefs. One of the things I recall from one Alan Watts discussion is he talked about a particular, like English or specialist, writer, professor, whatever it was. And the guy said, look, you give me any book, I can read, whatever, one page, half a page, whatever, and tell you within 10 years when that book was written. Because what I can see is the way the way they talked at the time, the phrases they used, it kind of implies the predominant thought and the way of looking at the world, etc. Right? And what that implies is a couple of things: that at that particular period in history, they wrote a particular way. And they spoke in a particular way. Why? Because they thought in a particular way. So our culture expresses our thoughts, right? And culture, it also works like this. It also works like this. And I learned this a long time ago. When you are happy, you smile, right? So a particular feeling that you have of something that you particularly like will cause your brain to react and send out certain signals, and electrical signals, dopamine, whatever the case may be, chemical signals that make you feel good, that make you feel pleasant, that may make you warm, may make you happy, and make you smile. So smiling can be a result of feeling happy, right? But if you don't feel happy, interestingly enough, if you smile, you'll start feeling happy. Why? Because your brain does not know the difference. And if you smile, it ain't much of a smile, but you get the picture. That's a cheesy, fake, phony looking smile. And you know that when you know it's a fake smile when you see one. But when you smile, the process reverses itself, interestingly enough. And so the brain, because you're smiling, thinks you're happy and releases those same signals to the rest of your body, right? So it can work both ways. Your brain, what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what you're experiencing can cause you to smile, or causing you to smile can cause you the reverse. Okay. So you could argue that one way, if it comes from what you see, hear, and think, that it's organic. And if you smile, you get the same results, but it's forced, it's created, it's not necessarily organic. You sat here and said, if I smile, I'll feel better, so I'm going to smile. And then you actually feel better. And you learn that you can do that. And whenever you don't feel happy, you start smiling. And oddly enough, it'll make you start feeling happy, right? Your facial expressions, your words. You can say things to yourself. You got to watch your language, right? You say the wrong thing, and you'll if you're ever around a person who deals with a lot of depression, you'll listen to their language. Their conversation is very negative. It's always, oh, why'd that have to happen? Oh, that's crap. I'll get around people, and you'll see people that are constantly in a good mood. Listen to their language. They're saying, "Oh, I'm glad. Well, I stubbed my toe. Ouch. Oh, well, things happen. I'm going to move on." And then they smile, right? Their conversation is a healthy conversation that creates a dynamic in which they're happy, as opposed to people that are more prone to depression. If you listen to their conversation, it tends to be negative, and it tends to drive them in the area of depression. Little do they know, if they were to change their conversation, they would feel better. Oftentimes, people are in such habits that if you say to a person that's kind of a depressed person, all you got to do is change your conversation and you'll feel better, they will push back and reject it. No, 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 that's not the way life really is. Life, you just think life is all happy. It isn't that way, because their mind can't do it, because they're so accustomed to experiencing negativity, to speaking negativity, to thinking negativity, that they don't see another option, right? Okay, I'm saying all that to talk about culture, to go somewhere with that. I was setting the foundation for something. Culture traditionally is believed to be organic. The people get together. Let me give you an example. One of the things that we really got big, and it's still there in U.S. culture, is high five, right? High five. Little kid, hey there, little Johnny, high five me, and they high five, and they're happy they can high five, and everybody smiles. Sports, high five, boom. That's part of the culture, right? If some guy scores a basket, kicks a field goal, they high five. Now there's chest bumps, all kinds of things like that, right? They came from the street, people high fiving. What happened was, there used to be, I'm gonna tell you where high five came from. Culturally, there was a thing in the community. When growing up, my best friend played football, and it started with the football players. They would do what's called, it was in the Black community, DAP, right? First it was slap me five, right? Boom. And that was like a greeting, right? So, and then everybody started doing it, slap me five, boom. And then it started growing from slap me five to DAP. What was DAP? DAP is now people would develop their own handshake, their own slap me five. And it would be like, slap this way, miss, elbow, you know what I mean? And it was almost like this. And people did it for fun on the street. It was like an elaborate dance. We got our DAP. What is it? We're going to slap this, do that. 2 fingers this way, miss once, miss twice, high five. You know what I mean? It was something that kids did, and particularly for college football players were doing that. They get a touchdown and they'd be in the end zone. It's boom, boom, boom. You'll see some elaborate, if you ever watch football, U.S. football, you'll see some of these elaborate things that people do. These guys get in the end zone, they're kids to me, and they score a touchdown and they boom, 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 and they're doing 4 or 5 different celebratory things. That was DAP. Right. And then it kind of developed into people jumping up to the high five. Woo, it's slap me five. Right. High five is a reach up. And then these college athletes would score a basket or something. They jump way up for the high five. Right. And then people started high fiving. Oh, man. And then they're high fiving kids and high fiving their girlfriend. And it developed to be part of our culture. It organically developed to be part of the culture, and nobody knew where it really came from if they didn't know about DAP and slap me five. That was in the Black community. What's up, slap me five, bro? Boom, slap me five. That's a greeting, like shaking hands, but a cooler way of shaking hands, right? It was the young people that would do that. Okay, but what is it? What am I saying? From the people in the community, you develop something, and then it becomes part of the culture. Cinco de Mayo, the 5th of May. There's a lot more Latin people. It started being, and do you think they celebrated St. Patty's Day before all these Irish people got here? Irish people came, they brought St. Patrick's Day and things with them, right? Boom, that becomes part of the culture. Cinco de Mayo, you got more Latin people. 5th of May, now everybody's got another excuse to drink, which is, hey, it's St. Patty's Day. Give me something to drink. Swing it down. Everybody's wasted. Cinco de Mayo. Oh, it's Corona now. Give me a Corona. Boom, right? Again, it develops as part of the culture. And it's natural, and it's part of enjoying the culture. And you're an American, jazz becomes out of you. Blues comes out of hard times, right? Guys in the depression, hard times, and they're boom, now it's blues. That's they have like a couple chords. My woman done left me. My mother died. My dog ran off. Whatever. The blues, right? Singing the blues, talking about how bad things are, right? And before I know I got lots of friends that love the blues. Blues is great. Blues is good stuff, right? Um, and so all these things develop organically out of the culture, right? And you go around the world and, whatever country you are, and things developed organically out of the culture, and they're not enforced. So some things come and go. So a culture is like a wave, right? Things come in the culture. The things that people were doing in the 50s, wearing in the 50s, the way people acted in the 50s in a particular country, some things are still there, some things aren't. Right. I tell you what I found interesting when I started learning about the Latino culture, and I'm going somewhere with this, so don't lose me. When I went to this Colombia, it was a Colombia festival, Colombian people festival, whatever you want to call it. And they had this guy, Joe Arroyo, and he played salsa music, right? And man, that freaking guy, if you ever heard a live salsa band, there ain't nothing better. But they must have 50 people on the stage and they're hitting little bells and doing, the sound was incredible. And what I noticed was, because in a lot of communities you go into, the young people dance one way, the old people dance another way, whatever. When I went there, everybody was doing salsa. The young, the old, everybody, the little, everybody, they're dancing and they're salsa. And it was so much fun. I'm like, man, the Latino culture sure is, these people know how to have fun. And they had Coronas and they were, limes all over the place and great food. I really enjoyed myself, right? Again, we're talking about organic cultures that come from hard times. Some of them, a lot of our culture, a lot of the best of our culture comes from hard times, comes from things that change, things like that, right? Okay. Now, there's a phenomenon that's going on in the US and in the West that I think is very dangerous and unhealthy, right? And it is government taking the lead on culture. And then now you hear something that I think is really nasty: cancel culture. Cancel culture, right? That is an aggressive way. It is the US empire, right? It is imperialism. It is domination. It is hegemony moved into the cultural sphere. One of the ways that I put it is this: if you think about it, this monster, we can call it whatever you choose to call it, neoliberalism, capitalism. If you're on the right, you're going to call it communism or something. I don't know. Everybody's got a name. Whatever they don't like, that's what they're going to call it. Globalism. It doesn't matter which ism you use. Doesn't matter. Those are only words, right? I study Zen, so I know the difference between words and symbols and what those words and symbols are referring to, right? Most people think the words and symbols are what they're referring to. The words and symbols are symbolic of something. When you say globalism, when you say capitalism, whatever, that's just a sound. That sound refers to something. So whatever you want to call neoliberalism, globalism, capitalism, fascism, communism, liberalism, all those, they all actually have definitions. But I think one of the issues with this thing is that it is so undercover, it's so slick that people don't really know what it is, and so they're always searching for a word for this thing, right? So I'm going to give it like this, and forgive me if you've heard this part before. The foreign policy of this thing, the militaristic foreign policy of this thing, people like me refer to it as neoconservatism, right? The economic policy of it and the cultural policy of it that we refer to as neoliberalism. So I hope I didn't get that right. Neoconservatism, the aggressive, assertive, dominant imperialism. Somebody will use that. Most of us use neoconservatism or imperialism, right? It's an aggressive, it's a very violent foreign policy, right? A dominant foreign policy. Neoliberalism, most of us think of that as the economic, the way they go around the world. They're going to they go to a particular country and they tell them what they can and can't do with their money. It's built on debt. Neoliberalism is built on debt. That's why it has to in the same way that when the what we now call the neoliberal, when the imperialists, when the dominant countries, the neocolonialists, when they had, this is important, when they had industry, before they deindustrialized, They needed natural resources. So they went around the world to steal your natural resources. They're going to rub your country out so they can take your natural resources, whatever it is, iron, nickel, you name it, because they needed them to go in their factories to make things. Well, now they use the World Bank, the IMF. Why? Because this monster, this machine, runs off of debt. It runs off of putting people in debt. So what they need to do is go around the world and find people to put in debt, right? So now, instead of going to Africa, we want to go to Africa and steal your goods. Yeah, that's fine. We'll steal it somewhat for what we need it. For the most part, we need to go make you some loans so we can put you in debt, because this system runs off of debt, creating more and more debt. Same thing. I'm going to go to your country, overthrow your country, insert a puppet government, dominate, mistreat you. But it's not because I want to steal your nickel and gold and oil like I used to. I may, sure, because it's there and I can get it. But the main thing is I want to give you all these IMF loans. I want to do what they're doing in Ukraine right now, which is bring BlackRock in to buy all the farmland. So now they can grow GMO wheat and corn. They can introduce that into the EU. They can destroy the prices and run all of the farmers in the EU out of business. And then guess what now? We buy all their farms for pennies on a dollar and grow all our GMO stuff there, right? But we can do all that stuff. But the big thing we want to do as we go around the world is we want to put people in debt. And as we run out of people out there to put in debt, we got to put our own citizens in debt, because this machine runs off debt. The reason the U.S. is 34 trillion in debt, the reason corporations are all in debt, the reason states are in debt, they put people, because this machine runs off of debt. Right now, the EU wants to sell Euro bonds. Why? They put themselves in debt. The whole machine runs off of debt. That is the fuel for this machine, is debt. Debt, debt, debt. That's why they can't compete with Russia and China, because debt can't compete with people who produce oil and gas and make things. You got to, and the problem is a lot of your debts become unpayable. So you constantly need new debtors. Now, one of the machinations of neoliberalism. So we talked about the economic part. We've talked about, the militaristic part, neoconservatism, of this monster, whatever we want to call it. We've talked about the economic part that runs off of debt. That's neoliberalism. There's another part that I don't really have a name for. Maybe we can call it part of the neoliberalism, part of all the above. It's just, maybe this is the grease that oils the machine for the other two, right? It's the cultural part, right? The cultural part is, and that's cancel culture. When your cultural beliefs are aligned with the government, yeah, they ain't yours, right? So let's start here. One of the things you noticed from the thumbnail that I put up was a rainbow flag, right? Why is that? It's critical. It's very important to understand this. The issue of humankind, one of the issues of humankind are the expectation of rights, right? The expectation of rights. Do all people, race, color, creed, all of the above, have the same expectation of rights? That's a big question. We had apartheid countries, still got one now. Particular, we have all kinds of issues and fights in your country. Do people of different religions have the same expectation of rights? All these kinds of things, right? So what happens? So the neoliberal, neoconservative government, imperialist, whatever, capitalist, I don't care what you want to use them, these monsters discovered something and realized something, that they, in order to really have a grip on the people, they needed to control the culture. They needed to say not only what you can, where you can work and how your life and your economic style can work, can be, but they needed to control what you think. They needed to control how you expressed yourself and how the entire system expresses themselves, how the people expresses themselves. This is another way of controlling the people. So if you think about it, one thing's for sure, they are not for the same expectation of rights for all people. Let me give you an example. If you start asking, let's say a Tony Blinken, a Joe Biden, any of them, go to the Republican Party. It doesn't matter. They're all neoliberals, right? Go to the Republicans, go to the Democrats, and you say, should all human beings have the same expectation of rights? They're most likely all going to say yeah. And you then break them down. Really? Does that include the Palestinians? Should the Palestinians have the same expectation of rights as the Israelis? For all, I guarantee there are people that are conservatives. There are people that are all various ideologies who, if you ask them that question, who right now are looking at what's happening in Gaza saying, this is unreasonable. I don't like this. This is not fair. Why? Because these are people who may be attacked, called white supremacists, everything. But because the whole cancel culture thing, they may be attacked for various reasons. But the reality is, when they look at the Gaza issue, they say, hey, wait a minute. The Palestinians don't have the same expectations as rights as their Jewish or even atheist Israeli counterparts. Well, that ain't fair. That will look at Ukraine and say, well, wait a minute. What the Banderites are saying is that the Eastern Ukrainians, that the Russian speakers, they call them names and they say they shouldn't have the same expectation of rights as us. Well, that's not fair. I don't care what the government tells me. Everybody should have the same expectation of rights. And people are looking at that. And I think that for a lot of people like me, the motivating factor is, hey, when I look at whatever country, I don't care what country it is. Don't tell me which country is good or bad, which leader is good as bad, or is good or bad. I want to see, do the people in that country have the same expectation of rights as the people in this country and every other country? That's part of my culture, I guess, as it is, right? So one of the ways that these beasts, these monsters, found to use that particular area of our thought, our culture, to control us, was to say, let's pick a group that we want to put at the top, right? Well, they could say Latinos, but there could be some issues there. There's a lot of them. They could see Black people. There's some issues there. There's a lot of them. But interestingly enough, they chose a group that's very, very small. And the smaller, I'm not saying that and keep in mind something, and they actually chose the smallest fraction of that group to put to the forefront. Gay people, yeah, there's plenty of gay people, whatever, but they're not a huge group in society. So that's why they chose them. And when it comes to trans, what is that, 0.0001% or something? I mean, you probably hardly even meet a trans person once a year. A lot of us, very, very rare, right? Depending on where you live. And if you're in the city, you're more likely to, but it's very, very rare. So it's not an accident that the government said we're standing for trans rights, when the fact of the matter is there's so few trans people. It makes it easier. You don't really have to do anything. You can say I'm standing for trans rights, but there's still a few trans people that, just like every now and then, you'll have a trans bathroom bill or something like that. And you can stand up and say, hey, I'm a good guy. I'm for good stuff because I'm for rights of this tiny, tiny, tiny little group. Now, this is not a discussion of rights of any group, of trans rights or gay rights or Black rights or white rights or no rights. This is not a discussion of rights. This is a discussion of the government and their machinations and how they're looking at the American people and they're saying they're thinking on their own. They're making their own priorities. They're deciding what's important to them. And we have to control them. So now we got to take control of the culture because to sum it up, in my opinion, I consider these people fascists. And fascists want to control everything. They want full control. They want you, the ruling elite, want you to do what you're told and nothing more. They don't want you coming up with ideas and notions and thoughts and beliefs. They don't want you to have a culture where you say, okay, I think this is right or this is wrong. They only want to tell you what's right or wrong, when and why or not, and how. And they want a way that they can attack you anytime they want to. And one of the ways they've chosen is to use the term human rights. Now, what does that mean? What does human rights mean? It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't have a definition. That's why they chose it. The best thing for me to do if I want to control people is pick something that doesn't have a definition, because I can define it whenever I choose. I can define it as the situation calls for it. I can define it in an arbitrary manner, right? Arbitrary application of the law as opposed to rule of law. Remember, rule of law is consistency. Arbitrary application of the law means I use the law against my adversaries, lawfare. So I'm standing for human rights. And here's the thing about this. And this is what's brilliant, when someone says they stand for human rights, who wouldn't want to? They've chosen a term that no decent person wants to say they oppose. Are you for human rights? You got to say, oh, yes, of course, for human rights. But when someone says, are you for human rights? What I say is this. Well, it all depends. Tell me what you mean. What is the definition of, before I say that I'm in favor of human rights, give me a transparent definition, right? A consistent definition. That's what I want. I want transparency. I want to know what you mean very specifically when you say, do I support human rights? And I want that standard applied consistently, right? When you say the Chinese are doing something to the Xinjiang Muslims in Xinjiang, I want to say, okay, the Chinese are doing something wrong to the Muslims in Xinjiang. Number one, I'd like to see the evidence of that. Don't just make this. They're doing it, and I'm just supposed to believe you and support it. I want to see the evidence of it, of what, evidence of what's going wrong. I want to see it. I want to understand it. I want the right to inspect it for myself, to research it myself, so I can make decisions based on what I find too. I don't want just you to say, the Chinese are doing something wrong to Xinjiang, and I just join in the chorus. Or if I say, well, I don't know, I've looked into that and I don't agree with that. Oh, you wouldn't, so you're evil too. That's cancel culture. Cancel culture is the government sets up an enemy, whoever it is. Doesn't matter. It could be a person in Vladimir Putin. It could be the Russians, the Iranians, the Cubans, whatever, right? It could be a group. Whatever, but the government sets it. It comes from the ruling elite. The person or group that you are supposed to oppose, dislike, hate, accept that they're evil, whatever the case, comes from above. It is not organically developed from the bottom. First of all, I don't believe that hate and anger and those kind of things against particular groups do organically develop at the bottom. I think that they are part of the ruling elite of trying to divide us more often than not. If somebody comes up and punches you, you get punch them back and defend yourself. But to say, I hate this whole group of people, that generally benefits the ruling elite. That's generally a way to keep the masses, the working class and the masses fighting amongst each other, so we don't realize that they're robbing us blind and they're destroying our lives and killing us and dragging us into war, things of that nature. That's what they want to do, keep us apart. So what you have is you have a ruling elite that says, I'm going to pick the issue of gay. Oh man, trans is the best because there's so few trans people. Then I can use that to attack my enemies in the most preposterous and absurd way. It doesn't matter. Somebody can say, if you, for instance, the thing about that's so insidious about the government and the ruling elite guiding your culture is this. Part of what they have come up with, and this is really devious, is a war on epistemology. Epistemology being, how do I know what I know, right? If you believe something, what causes you believe it? What evidence do you have that it's true, right? They have a war on that. You have to accept what you're told. So when someone says, when someone says something that it aligns with the government's cultural ideology, cultural push, if you question it, if you discuss it, if you ask for evidence, you're attacked. It's not not only is it wrong not to go along with it, it's wrong to try to figure out whether you should go along with it. So if someone says there's a trans bathroom bill, right? Do you support it? You can. Now, what does Garland say? Garland says, I'd like to do some research. I need some empirical data. What is the reasoning for this bathroom bill? Where did it come from? What problem are you solving? Is this a solution searching for a problem? Is there a problem that needs to be solved? What are the details of this bill? I want to read this bill and find out what problem it resolves. And this is important. This is critical when it comes to these cultural issues. A term that's used in, say, law, and that is interest, right? You have to be concerned with the interests of all, such as, let me give you a perfect example. There was a particular swimmer. Probably people know of it. The person was trans, and the guy was swimming as a male, and he was like 400th or something in the country. This person then decided to do, for whatever reason, and none of my business, I don't really care, to take the hormones and do all the stuff and then identify as a woman. This person was then allowed to swim as a woman and was the number one in the country. Now, at that point, there are those of us who certainly would like to have a discussion about that. Well, I'm a person with a daughter. If my daughter was competing against a person who was born with a physical advantage, I would have some questions. I'd say, wait a minute, my daughter's little and skinny as a rubber. My daughter was in high school. She was skinny as a friggin' string bean, right? Little, and would it be fair, looking out for the interests of the female athletes, to compete against a person who was biologically born as a male, right? Okay. It's not an unreasonable question. But now that government controls culture, right? Now that the ruling elite controls the culture, 20 years ago, people would have said, let's sit down and have a talk about that, right? Reasonable people would say, you know what, Garland, that makes sense. Let's have a discussion about it, right? Let's have a discussion. Let's have a talk. And I could present evidence. They can present evidence. And I could say, we have to consider the interest of the female athletes. The female athlete who before she won as a female athlete, and now a person who was born as a biological male, this person is an athlete, and this person was born larger. They're 6'4". She was born 5'4", and they're more likely to be born as a biological male, 6'4", and she's more likely to be born by 5'4". And guess what? They're swimming. One has longer arms. One has more muscle mass. Things of that nature. Those are all empirical issues. It is what it is, right? That's not I'm good, I'm bad, or I'm right, I'm wrong, or I'm wrong. People, biological males, are born more often than not larger than biological females when they're born. That is not an anti-anybody discussion. It's a reasonable discussion, right? And so the bottom line is, the wise and reasonable discussion in a culture is one that allows people to push back on a particular issues that are going on, parts of the culture that are growing. Let's say the rights of gay people and the rights of trans people are growing, and nothing wrong with that. As I said, everybody should have the same expectation of rights. But now you have a conflict of interest when it comes to a point where the interest of the female athletes and the interests of the trans athlete who was born a biological male start to clash. In a reasonable society, a discussion needs to be had. That's all I think a lot, people want to attack us for saying, no, that's a valid discussion. That's a discussion needs to be had. But what I'm talking about is this: once the government and the ruling elite take control of it, it works for them to have that particular thing going on, to be able to say, we're going to really move this trans issue to the top. And then they can use it to attack their enemies. One of the clues to me that a cultural issue is a imperialist, hegemonic, neoconservative, warmongering weapon is when you see it being used to attack. When you see it not used to solve problems, but used to attack and smite your enemies. Sexism, right? Oh, sexism, right? So what we heard was, oh, people have got to be thrown out of Congress. All these things have to be taught. One guy, there was a picture of him, doing things. Some woman came in, 25 years ago, he ogled my breast or something. Boom, he's out the door, right? Now, interestingly enough, here was the giveaway. A woman named Tara Reid came forward and said, oh, by the way, Joe Biden, did an unthinkable thing to me. It was many years ago. And I know now it's trust women, believe women, all that kind of stuff. So I know you guys are going to be all over that. And they said, no, we're not. There was an organization at that time. Tara Reid went to this organization and they'd been doing the whole Me Too thing. And she said, hey, Joe Biden put the grab on me. And therefore, hey, I want you guys to act on it. Now, at that point, all they needed against their adversaries was the slightest hint that the person might have thought something sexist at one time when they were in kindergarten, and they would rip them to pieces. And now they had a legitimate complaint against Joe Biden. And she was like, and look, you can check the records because I complained and there's records of blah, blah, blah. They wouldn't do it. They just disappeared. In fact, that organization kind of dissolved. Why? Why did that organization dissolve? Because it was a government creation. It was a creation of the ruling elite. Me Too was a creation of the ruling elite. It was a new tool they had that they could smite their enemies. They could attack their enemies. They could call them sexist. Oh, you did this or that, and take them apart. Here's an example. Recently, in my opinion, they've been going after Donald Trump. It was one of the tools they used to go after Donald Trump. They called him every sexist, every whatever in the world, right? Now, whether Donald Trump is sexist towards women or whatever is not relevant. And here's why. It would only be relevant if they held Joe Biden to the same standard, right? Hey, Donald Trump supposedly touched a woman 25 years ago. Okay. And he needs to go down. He's a sexist, racist pig. Oh, now we got the same complaint against Joe Biden. That lady's crazy. She's a Russian bot, probably working directly for Putin, blah, 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 right? It was clearly a weapon that was used to smite their enemies. That's the issue of this whole cultural thing. When you see issues of culture being used by the ruling elite, being used by the parties, being used by their minions, whether it's in Hollywood or wherever the case may be, when you see cultural issues being used to smite the enemies of the ruling elite, that's when you know it's a fraud. And that's what I'm saying. That's why I'm using this term human wrongs. These are not about human rights. These are human wrongs. This is the government and the ruling elite controlling the culture and using the culture to smite their enemies. And that's what we're experiencing in the US. And what happens as a result is your culture starts to drift because people don't know what to make of this. Every time they turn around and come up with something new, that is either inculcated into the system of weaponry, of cultural weaponry. There's a good word. It's inculcated into the system of cultural weaponry, or it's discarded. One of the things that's interesting when you look at the NBA or the NFL, they're allowed to put things on the back of their helmet in the NFL, and you'll see things like "Stop hate." Stop hate. Right? Things that mean nothing. Stop hate. What does that mean? People have those kinds of things on the back of their football helmets. They're allowed to put this. You know what you'll never see on the back of a football helmet? An anti-war slogan. Why? Because when the football game starts, right? Part of our culture is sports. Sports is part of culture. Ask anybody from a country that loves football, which is soccer, right? And soccer is part of the culture, right? But so what do? You watch a football game. What happens now? They're flying over with fighter jets. There's soldiers everywhere. But when the game starts off, the Marine Corps band is going to come out and sing the Star Spangled Banner. Then you're going to see the coaches on the side that are going to have like a hat with that's camouflage that says NFL supports our troops. NFL supports the Wounded Warrior Program. NFL. So the part of your culture of sports will be taken over by the militarism. right? Part of sports, you're watching sports all day, great. We want to make sure that you support your troops and the Wounded Warrior Project and all this kind of stuff. And then they're going to bring out some wounded soldier with one leg and everybody's got to clap. Yay, hooray. Oh, well, look at this guy. They don't say how he lost his leg by going to some country, killing some innocent freaking civilian, blowing him. It wasn't his fault. He was doing what he thought he was joining the military to go protect his country. He wasn't. He was going to protect the world for cultural imperialism, for corporate oligarchs. But he didn't know that, and now he comes back, and we have to say he's a hero because that's part of the culture, is to say he's a hero, a militaristic culture. So at any rate, so we have now the ruling elite usurping our sports. Right? They're supposed to say whatever. They'll put Black Lives Matter on it. Let me talk about this as a Black person. What the hell does that even mean? You know, you've got all these conservatives freaked out over Black Lives Matter. I'm a Black person. Let me tell you what it means. It don't mean nothing much to the Black community. Actually, the people that say Black Lives Matter now are all white. Black folks don't even say that. Right? But it's the liberal class who, like, they got on something that says, yeah, every now and then you'll see a Black person with a Black Lives Matter shirt on a Black person, but it's rare. It's like, oh, this stale, it's done. Why? Because it was not ever anything. Here's what happened. It started off, somebody did hashtag Black Lives Matter. And the reason that happened was because Black folks, you know, some unarmed Black guy holds up a phone and the police are like, oh my God, a shiny object. Boom, he gets shot 84 times and the police don't get charged with anything. No crime, no nothing, you know, and it happens over and over. And so what Black people were saying is, well, if a Black person gets killed, they don't even care. Their life doesn't matter. But here's my point. There was something to it. There was a foundation to it. If you ask, and see, that's when things are organic. If you ask a person at that time, a Black person, what does Black Lives Matter mean? They could tell you. Oh, yeah, it has to do with police shooting, and then nothing happens to the cops. And then, you know, so the Black lives must not matter. And this is that. You know what I mean? It had a foundation. It had a definition. People knew what it meant. Then, like the George Floyd thing happened or whatever, and the liberals grabbed it. And it became nothing. It became the same as a rainbow flag. It became the same as trans bathroom bills or whatever. They're not really there to help trans people. They're not really there. A person doesn't most of these people, they don't put a rainbow flag out there because they give a crap about gay people. They do because it's fashionable amongst them and their friends. They put a sticker on their car. They put a flag in it. We support Black Lives Matter. And they literally, you'll ride down the street in DC in the wealthier neighborhoods, upper class neighborhoods, and you'll see all these liberals with two flags, right? A Black Lives Matter flag and a rainbow flag. And they don't give a crap about those people, but it's fashionable in their culture. It's something that they can put on, they can put out there, they can virtue signal, and they can say, look at me. I stand for Black Lives Matter. Really, what's that mean? That Black Lives Matter something too. I don't know. I bought the flag on the corner. Some guy was selling it for $10. Everybody in my community has a flag that says Black Lives Matter. I stuck it up. It doesn't really mean anything. Then the George Floyd thing happened, and all these liberals run around screaming Black Lives Matter. It didn't really mean anything, but it was a popular thing to do. And then some group, now, and think about this. So you had all these people like Black Lives Matter, like it was like a real organization. It wasn't really anything, right? It's an organization. They got a national headquarters somewhere and affiliate, but it was nothing. You, me, or anybody else on any given day could say, this is if you live in Philadelphia, we've got the Philadelphia chapter of Black Lives Matter. It don't matter because it's not like there was a headquarters. It's not like it was a trademark name. You could just come. It was a friggin' hashtag. That's all it was. So then some women, 3 Black girls, I think it was, decided they were the leaders of Black Lives Matter. And why the hell not? You know what I mean? I guess, hey, so what happens? All these liberals and corporations come in. We're supporting we're giving money to Black Lives Matter. In other words, if there was something there, they wanted to co-opt it. And if it wasn't something there, they wanted to create it. Millions of dollars go in, right? They didn't really have anything. What are they going to do? It was a match. So they get all these millions of dollars coming to these people who supposedly got run Black Lives Matter now, right? And they just like pilfered the money. I think one of the women bought like a couple of houses for $1.5 million or something. Just spent the money willy nilly. And I thought, yeah, that's how neoliberal works. Why wouldn't they? And the people were like, see, they're Black Lives Matter. They threw the money away. And I'm like, yeah, of course they threw the money away. The whole thing was a fraud. It was never anything but a hashtag. And some people figured out that they could fill their pockets using a hashtag that wasn't trademarked, and they did it. And the liberals came along and said, here's money from the corporation so we can control this thing that doesn't exist and pretend that it exists. There you go. Black Lives Matter. That was it. It was all a fraud. It never was anything. It wasn't a real movement to help Black people or anybody else. It was a hashtag. The liberals co-opted the hashtag, and then they added it to their list of cultural weapons to attack somebody. So now they can call you a racist. Right. And the rainbow flag. Where's your rainbow flag? Yeah, I don't have one. Oh, so you're a anti-trans, you're a homophobe, right? They can attack you for that. If you try to discuss these things, hey, there's rainbow flags all over the place, but I don't really think you guys care about anybody. I knew that, you homophobe. Of course, if Joe Biden screamed the F word 100 times in a row, if somebody on their team said something they shouldn't say or did something they shouldn't do, they will ignore it. Why? Because these are weapons. They're only used to smite their enemies. They're weapons, they're cultural weapons used to attack their enemies. That's the difference between a high five, which develops on the street, moves to the football field, and then into the end as an end zone, and then everybody's high fiving their little kid. I did it. Little kids for, hey, come here, little piggy. Hi, here, high five. Boom. And you high five your little kid and they grin and they're happy. And you teach your dog, hey, look at this, a short video on, I've seen them on YouTube, and some guy high fives this cat. And he's like, wow, a cat can high five. That's cool. That's culture. That's great. That's real. But the idea that Tony Blinken has decided that literally that he's going to stick rainbow flags and Black Lives Matter flags up at embassies around the world. Embassies, might I add, that the CIA work out of to overthrow that same damn country. The only place that Black lives don't matter to Tony Blinken in Black countries, because they're stealing stuff from them. They're robbing them blind. They're overthrowing their countries. So Black Lives Matter until they go to Africa. When they get to Africa, Black lives don't matter so much, because you got to steal the people's stuff, overthrow their country, drop bombs, and murder the people. Right. So they're always, when in fact, this, let me see this. Watch this. This is, you're going to love this. Watch this. Let's see. Biden, the other one, Islamophobia. So let me give you a perfect example. Here's one. You're going to love this. You want to see a perfect example of what I'm talking about, of how much it's a bunch of bull crap, how they use it to try to protect themselves when they're doing the most evil things. Right now, there's a genocide going on, and Joe Biden is at the head of it. Well, what do you know? Biden condemns Islamophobia as amid Gaza war, rights group urges U.S. policy change, right? President Joe Biden on Friday condemned what he termed an ugly resurgence of Islamophobia since the October 7th. Yeah! How about you condemn the ugly resurgence of genocide since October 7th? Again, the games they're playing, right? But a leading Muslim advocacy group dismissed his comment and urged a change in U.S. policy, right? So they go on to talk about it. Key quotes: we recognize the violence and hate that Muslims worldwide too often face because of their religious roots. This is Joe Biden. And the ugly resurgence of Islamophobia in the wake of the devastating war in Gaza. Islamophobia has no place in our nation, yet Muslims in the United States frequently endure baseless fear-mongering, blatant discrimination, harassment, and violence in the course of their everyday lives. So Joe Biden wants to use this cultural bullcrap, Islamophobia, to try to tell us that he's concerned about violence in the lives of Muslims. Joe Biden's concerned they get harassment, mistreated, violence. You see what I'm saying? Islamophobia is a terrible thing, isn't it? And Joe Biden is here to tell us that he stands against it as he is weaponizing Israel day after day so they can slaughter Muslims by the tens of thousands. There we go, my friends. That is the perfect example that of the hypocrisy. But what it shows is that these things are nothing more than tools. They're nothing more than evil tools that they can be used. So they now, if you say the wrong thing, and keep in mind something on the other side, right? Watch this. You want to see that they're all tools? Let me wait a minute. Anti-Semitism. I'm going to look that up, right? Let's just go right to the news. Here we go. Perfect example. Chicago Jewish leaders want to shine light on anti-Semitism, right? Leaders in the Chicago's Jewish community came together Wednesday to shine a light on alleged anti-Semitism. They said embedded in some rallies for ceasefire and humanitarian aid for people in Gaza is anti-Semitism. We stand in absolute unity when these groups and their supporters use Israel's justified war. Listen to this: Israel's justified war with Hamas to bully, intimidate, and instill fear in the Jewish community. Right? Okay, so again, these are cultural weapons, human wrongs. So now, when a bunch of people come together, hold up flags, and say, look, we are opposed to what's going on now. Tens of thousands of Palestinians are being killed. And what they say is this. You notice, they didn't say they're outright doing anything that's anti-Semitic. They said embedded in some rallies, right? So embedded in some rallies almost sounds like, how would I find it? It's embedded. It's really hard to find there, but somewhere in there is anti-Semitism. So again, what is it? Think about this. At a time when Israel is committing a genocide against the Palestinians, perfect example of what I'm talking about. Joe Biden stands up and says, we've got to fight Islamophobia. And these people come and say, we've got to fight anti-Semitism. Which of those makes any sense at all? None. The bottom line is this. If we're arguing about Islamophobia, oh God, boy, that Joe Biden's a great guy. He's standing up for human rights. He's all against Islamophobia. Meanwhile, these Jewish leaders are, hey, we're standing up against anti-Semitism. Oh yeah, boy, we got to fight anti-Semitism. That's a terrible thing, right? What we're not talking about is that Israel is committing a genocide. And you know something? Fascism does not have to do with being with your religion or your ideology. Fascism is fascism. This is a genocide. There's been genocides committed by black folks. There's been genocides committed by white folks. There's been genocides committed by capitalists. There's been genocides committed by a communist. There's been genocides committed. Everybody always has that somebody else committed the genocide. A genocide is wrong. Who's committing the genocide is only useful if you have an ideological bent. That's useful. But a genocide is what it is. And so what they take it now is this and say, we have to protect ourselves. What's going on here is that what Israel is doing is pure evil and it's genocide. What's wrong is that Joe Biden is supporting pure evil and genocide. And so now you're not supposed to protest the genocide or you're anti-Semitic. And Joe Biden says, no, I couldn't. Now, he says, I'm standing up to Islamophobia. And then when somebody says, why are you slaughtering all of these Muslims? That is a terrible thing to do. And he says, well, you know, I stand up against Islamophobia, so it couldn't be that I belittle their lives and existence because they're not Christians. The fact of the matter is some of them actually, the Palestinians actually are Christians. They're killing everybody who's around there. But the fact of the matter is that's a perfect example of what I'm saying. Of human wrongs. The government takes control of it. The government is now saying, as far as I'm concerned, is what I'm saying. If you have a embassy in a country, and that embassy is loaded with CIA agents, and they're running guns, and they're doing terrible things, and they're trying to overthrow the country, what do I care if you got a Black Lives Matter flag and a rainbow flag? What difference does that make? Doesn't matter. What you're doing is important, not what you're saying. Your rhetoric is unimportant. What they're saying is ignore what we're doing, listen to our rhetoric. And if you try to bring up what we're doing, we will use our rhetoric to attack you. It's nothing but a tool. And meanwhile, we're arguing over Black Lives Matter. We're arguing over Antifa. We're caught up in the stupidity, arguing over trans bathroom bills. Let me tell you something. One of the reasons I left the ACLU, and a lot of people know, but don't know it, some don't. I was on the national board of directors. I was with the ACLU for many, many years. ACLU is big, very powerful. A lot of people don't realize how powerful the ACLU is. I mean, when I think, was it 2021 or 2022 was the year I resigned in protest. But so I'll say to people, you think you know how powerful the ACLU is? How much money you think the ACLU brings in the year I left? And people will be like, 30 million. Pennies. 100 million. Ho, ho, ho. The ACLU would close down if they brought in a meager 100 million. When I was there, last year I was there, they brought in $300 million. $300 million. The ACLU is a very powerful. The National Rifle Association is not a pimple on the behind of the ACLU, right? And when I was there, we used to do all kinds of controversial things. We literally defended the KKK. I literally went on television myself. Oh, I don't know how many news shows I was on talking about our defense. Now, did we defend the KKK? Not really. Not really. What we defended was the Constitution. When somebody said the KKK can't do this, they can't get a permit for marching here. And what we said was, well, First Amendment. Sorry, you got to give them the permit. But the KKK is terrible. And we said, yeah, they are terrible. But the Constitution is what it is. If the KKK can't do it, then the NAACP can't do it. Then the group for Latino whatever can't do it. Then if you can do that on this group because it's a hate group, which it is, then you'll use that. You have now breached the First Amendment, and you'll take that breach and you'll go after groups that aren't hate groups. Sorry, we got to stand up for the First Amendment. That was the ACLU that I joined. That was the ACLU that I was part of, right? So bottom line is, it was, you got to stand for the first. The ACLU now, you go there, dude, all they got is the trans bathroom bill stuff. The only thing I see for the most part with the ACLU are things that would be acceptable by the Democratic Party. To me, the ACLU is nothing but an outgrowth. It's an appendage of the Democratic Party. Let's see them go after something. It's very rare. Right now, they're opposing the TikTok bill. That's a good thing, but it's the first thing I've seen in a while where they're taking a swipe at something the Democratic Party won't like. And I left. I resigned in protest from the ACLU for a number of reasons. But the bottom line is, it had become, not to beat up on the ACLU, but it had become, to me, in my opinion, to be frank, it's what I'm talking about. The national security state, the empire, has a number of tools that it uses within the cultural tools. I feel like the ACLU had become part of that cultural tool. I really felt as though it was part of the tool of the power ruling elite, and I started getting that feeling. I wasn't comfortable with the way people there thought, with the way they acted, with the way they saw the world. And they just became, to me, it was tools of the Democratic Party. I could tell you story after story. I remember sitting one day, and there were some good people. Like, one of my buddies is still there, and he's an Assange activist. I remember one day I was sitting, we were wherever, every 3 months, we were all somewhere in the country having a meeting. And there was a woman talking about her husband didn't vote for Hillary, and she wanted to punch him. Her husband. I just wanted to punch him because he wouldn't vote for Hillary. and how we're sexist and blah blah blah, and this sexism with Hillary. And I said, well, I didn't vote for Hillary, but it was because of her foreign policy. So what do you say to someone who it has nothing to do with her gender, who's unhappy with an aggressive, assertive neocon foreign policy? And she just kind of looked at me and didn't really say anything. Literally, that's what happened. She didn't have an answer because it had to be, oh, it's a sexist. You didn't vote for Hillary. That was the discussion. And keep in mind something. If it's sexist not to vote for Hillary, that means that you can't discuss her foreign policy, can you? It can only be sexism. It can't be foreign policy, can it? That's part of the game. Part of the game, part of the whole game is to use culture as a weapon and to use that to jostle people, to get people to look the other way. What the people, people that don't know what jostling means, jostling is this. It was a law that was developed because of pickpockets, right? A pickpocket, would there be two people working together? One of them bumps into you, that's called jostling. The other picks your pocket. Boom, this guy bumps you, look this way, that guy picks your pocket. When the cops came, they could arrest the guy who did the pickpocket, but the jostler, there was no law to charge him with. So they came up with a law, started in New York during World's Fair, called jostling. So they could now arrest the guy who bumped you as part of the crime, right? It's bumping someone. It's doing something to get them disoriented, to stop them from focusing on what's important, which is their wallet. How appropriate is that? Because the ruling elite's going to empty your damn wallet, right? But that's what's going on. When you say, I ain't going to vote for Hillary, they can jostle you now. They can bump you. They can throw you off balance. I'm not voting for Hillary. Oh, so you're a sexist. She's a strong woman. You don't like strong women, right? They can give you a straw man argument. You don't like strong women. But I preempted that. I heard the conversation, and before she could get into Garland's a sexist, I asked, what do you say to somebody like me who's concerned with foreign policy, who's anti-war, and who opposes Hillary's pro-war, neoconservative, aggressive, assertive foreign policy? What do you say to me? But it has nothing to do with gender. And the woman didn't have an answer. Why? Because in this system that they've created, where there are cultural weapons, if somebody can possibly get the conversation to an empirical level where you're talking about the issues rather than smiting your enemies, you're a sexist. No, you're a racist. No, you're a homophobe. Not that there aren't people that aren't sexist and racist and homophobes. But even that, they can still be right about something. You can be a racist, sexist, homophobe, and you can still be right about a particular individual issue. Every issue has to be evaluated based on the data, based on the merits of that particular issue, not the person that's making the argument about the issue. And the biggest part of this whole cultural war here is you don't argue about the issue. You attack the person who's making the issue, who's discussing the issue. You do everything to thwart it. I remember one time I was interviewing a guy, and real neoliberal kind of guy. And I remember saying, we were talking about Kamala Harris, and I said, look, my issue with Kamala Harris is she's a really bad politician. She's a horrible politician. She's one of the worst politicians that I've ever seen. And I don't think she should be in the position that she's in. And I don't like when I look at her history and what she's done, and I went over something, I'm not happy with Kamala Harris. And his answer was, well, I think we have to reconsider how we talk about Black female politicians because they're judged on a different scale, blah, blah, blah. In other words, Garland, I am going to find a way not to discuss the merits of Kamala Harris's ability and competency as a politician. I'm going to attack you for saying that you're not happy with her performance and you don't support her as a politician, right? That's the ruling elite's game. I have laid on the line. This is why. Here's my information. Here's my data. Hey, what about this guy that was in jail? They were about to execute him, and she tried to stop the execution. That's reason not to vote for somebody or to vote for somebody, depending on how you feel. He couldn't go there because I would have, I guess, won. He saw it as a win-lose. So instead, he goes to, she's a Black female and they're judged differently. All of those things may be factual. She is a Black female. She may or may not be judged differently. You might have a right. But in the instance of the particulars of the conversation that we were having, that was not relevant. But that's the game. That's the game. The game is to shut your mouth, to close you down, and to make sure that the government and those who are the ruling elite control the conversation. And they set the Overton window, as they say. They set the parameters. They set up the third rails on which you can't step. And might I add, they decide who their third rails are for, right? Look, somebody on Morning Joe can criticize Joe Biden. Not that they will, but they can. But I can't. If I would come on there and criticize Joe Biden, they'd attack me. Joe Biden can grab and ogle women and sniff all over children and do all these kind of things, and they won't say a word. Donald Trump walks by and he said some things that guys say in the locker room, grab him by the you-know-what. Yeah, I ain't saying I'm for that. I'm saying guys great say that stuff in the locker room. And Joe Biden actually grabs somebody you-know-what, right? According to Tara Reid, he literally grabbed somebody by the you-know-what. Think about this. They're going to take Donald Trump out for saying grab her by the you-know-what. When a woman comes forward and says, Joe Biden grabbed me by the you-know-what, they go after the woman. They run her out of the country. She fled to another country because the FBI was coming after her, literally. So Joe Biden grabs women by the you-know-what. Trump says it. I ain't saying he does or doesn't, but he said it. And the person who makes the accusation against Joe Biden is out of here. That is all you need to know about the game. Arbitrary application of the law. Lawfare. My team can do it. Anything. Your team stands to be attacked for anything they do. Why? Not because we don't like what they do, but because they're on your team. Because we don't like them, or because they're making a valid allegation or assertion or assumption, or because they want to have a discussion about something that we can't afford to talk about. Think about this before I go. What sense does it make to say, well, Russians can't sing in an opera, direct, because they're Russian? They can't run in the Boston Marathon. They can't participate in the Olympics because they're Russian. No, they were born as a Russian. So the person who tells me that they're standing up for human rights, against racism, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, right? Oh, now, here's the question that I would have to pose to them. Do you believe that everybody should have the same expectation of rights? Sure. Does that include Russians? Well, not exactly. The same expectation. A person who was born Russian, who they were born Russian. That is their violation, their human rights violation. Hey, this person wants to run in the best. We don't allow that. Your kind around here, son. Oh, well, could possibly maybe I sing in an opera? No, sirree, you came out of the wrong birth canal. But I'm standing over here. And I got a Black Lives Matter flag and a rainbow flag flying over the U.S. Embassy. But if you're a Russian, you can't, we're not going to read Dostoevsky anymore. He's dead. Tolstoy, history, done, toast. He's in the grave. We're not going to read him because he was Russian. Why? Again, it is an attempt to hijack a culture, to say we're going to pretend this culture doesn't exist. The culture is so evil, we can't even read stuff. We can't even hear singing from this culture again. But we got a Black Lives Matter flag and a rainbow flag flying over our embassies, which are loaded with CIA agents and operatives who are trying to overthrow your government. That's what we're up against. It is not looking out for Black people, green people, Jewish people, Islamic, nothing. It's all a fraud that's used as a political tool, as a political weapon to smite their enemies. And the standards that are used to smite their enemies are not applied to people on their own team. That's the key. All right, let's look and see if we have. Let's go. Okay. Jangle Jingle says, when the empire being humiliated on every front, will they go for vulnerable nations, AG Serbia, to improve their image of strength? I don't know what they'll do, to tell you the truth. Right now, I'm just watching, observing. So I wish I knew. Serbia is pretty tough, though. Serbia is strong. The Iranian Putin says, thanks, Garden. Thank you, Iranian Putin. It's a little too obvious, really. Uh, Thomas Wolf, thank you, brother Wolf. All right, let's see. Anybody on Rockfin? All right, somebody on Rockfin. How about we go to JVP repost? Garland marries street culture with amazing analysis. It's beautiful and super smart. Thank you very, very much. All right, thanks a lot, gang. Well, I guess that's the long and short of it. Certainly appreciate everybody taking time out. Here's what you have to do. Oh, Dostoevsky. Did he write The Death of Ivan Ilyich? Was that Dostoevsky? Absolutely fantastic. But at any rate, last but not least, does somebody tell me, was it The Death of Ivan Ilyich? Was that Dostoevsky? Yes. And Chekhov for plays. Remember, Chekhov was in Star. They used Chekhov in whatchamacallit, in Star Trek, right? At any rate, thank you very much, all. Number one, hit the like button. Number two, share this on all your social media platforms. Number three, if you can, whether it's Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee or PayPal or Cash App, whatever you can, please, if you can help the channel, I appreciate it. I'm on Rumble now. In case they throw me off of YouTube, please go to Rumble and become a member. I only got 2,000 followers on Rumble, so please, everybody who's here, I should get a like from everybody who's watching. Everybody who's watching should also go to Rumble. Additionally, my Rockfin channel, ROKFIN, please, everybody go to Rockfin and become a member. It doesn't cost anything to become a member on Rockfin. If you choose, you can become a subscriber. That's $14.99 a month. I would appreciate anybody who can, but if you can't, don't worry about it. Just become a member for free. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great day, evening. Peace. Oh, by the way, tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., I will be on with Scott Ritter. So, that's going to be a good time, right? Warrior Update with Scott Ritter tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Peace. I'm out. 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Somebody said it was Leo Tolstoy. It was Tolstoy who wrote The Death of Ivan Ilyich. Whatever the case, it was outstanding literature. Boy, Tolstoy was a genius, wasn't he? Oh, a lot of Russian geniuses. What a beautiful culture. Tchaikovsky. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I think in parts of Europe, they stopped playing the 1812 overture. Because I think that was celebrating a victory over Napoleon or something like that. And they stopped playing that. But, that's how these idiots are. That shows you they want to control the war. They don't want their people saying, wow, this Russian food is great. Wow, this Russian book, these Russian writers are genius. Russian philosophers are brilliant. Russian music is, this is great stuff from Russia. They don't want that. They're trying to brainwash their people into hating Russia. And you can't brainwash people if people actually experience the culture and realize the brilliance and beauty of Russian culture. You can't do that.